At the airport gate, my sister slapped me in front of everyone because I wouldn't give her my first-class seat to Hawaii. So, I canceled her entire trip and exposed every lie she'd ever told our parents. Hey Reddit, my sister physically assaulted me at an airport gate because I refused to downgrade myself so she could fly first class on a trip I paid for. What happened next destroyed her completely. Buckle up because this one's a ride. I'm Jake, 32 male, and I've spent the last decade building a career as a petroleum engineer in West Texas. Not glamorous work, mostly analyzing drilling data, optimizing extraction rates, and spending weeks at remote sites where the nearest civilization is a gas station 40 miles away. The job means long stretches in the field, living in company housing that's basically a glorified trailer, eating microwave dinners, and working 12-hour shifts in weather that ranges from blazing hot to freezing depending on the season. But it pays extremely well, like 6 figures well, and I've been smart with money since my first paycheck. No fancy car payments, no luxury apartment in the city, no trying to impress people with expensive watches or designer clothes. I drive a practical truck, live modestly, and bank most of what I earn. My sister Vanessa, 28 female, took a spectacularly different path. She's what she calls a lifestyle influencer, which apparently means posting photos of smoothie bowls and sunset meditations to her 8,000 followers while dispensing advice about manifesting abundance and finding your authentic self. The reality is less Instagram-worthy. She lives with our parents in the same bedroom she had in high school, works part-time at a boutique selling overpriced candles and throw pillows, and has never paid rent in her entire adult life. Her contribution to household expenses is posting pictures of mom's cooking and tagging local businesses for exposure. Our parents, Frank and Linda, are retired teachers who live comfortably but not extravagantly in the same 3-bedroom house in suburban Austin where we grew up. They spent 30 years dealing with budget cuts, difficult parents, and standardized testing nonsense. Dad taught history and coached baseball. Mom taught elementary school and somehow maintained her sanity, despite dealing with second graders and their helicopter parents for 3 decades. They're good people who worked hard their whole lives and deserve better than they got, which is why I decided to do something about it. Last year, I closed a major consulting contract, analyzing drilling efficiency for a mid-sized oil company. The project took 6 months of 18-hour days and weekend work, but came with a substantial bonus. The kind of bonus that makes you think about buying a boat you'll never use or upgrading to a truck with features you don't need. Instead, I decided to take my parents on their dream vacation to Hawaii. They'd talked about visiting the islands for as long as I could remember. Mom had this coffee table book about Hawaiian beaches that she'd page through during winter, sighing over turquoise water and palm trees. Dad had files of articles about Pearl Harbor and Hawaiian history saved on his computer, but teacher pensions don't leave much room for expensive vacations, and they'd always prioritized practical things like fixing the roof or replacing the water heater over tropical getaways. I booked us a week in Maui. Nothing extravagant, but nice. A hotel right on the beach with an ocean view, a rental car so we could explore the island, and enough in the budget for good restaurants and activities. I researched everything. Best snorkeling spots, scenic drives, local restaurants that weren't tourist traps. For myself, I booked first class. At 6 feet 3 inches and 210 pounds, 6 hours in a coach seat isn't just uncomfortable, it's medieval torture. My knees jam into the seat in front of me. I can't straighten my legs, and I always end up with my shoulders cramped from trying to fit into a space designed for people 8 inches shorter than me. So yeah, I paid extra for the legroom and comfort. I'd earned it. My parents got premium economy. Not first class, but better than coach. More legroom, better seats, actually decent food. They were thrilled. Mom called me 3 times after I sent her the itinerary just to say how excited she was. Here's the important part. Vanessa wasn't originally part of this trip. She hadn't been invited, wasn't consulted, wasn't even mentioned during the planning process. I deliberately organized this as a gift specifically for my parents. A thank you for putting up with public school bureaucracy for 30 years, and for supporting me through engineering school when money was tight. This was their trip, their reward, their vacation. But somehow, about 2 weeks before departure, Vanessa knew every detail. She knew the dates, the airline, the hotel name, even what activities I'd booked, and she decided, unilaterally without asking, that she was coming too. The campaign for inclusion started during our regular Sunday dinner at my parents' house. I'd driven 3 hours from the current drill site, still covered in dust and smelling like diesel, just to spend the weekend and finalize trip details with Mom and Dad. I'd barely walked through the door when Vanessa cornered me in the kitchen. So I've been looking at the Hawaii trip. she said, scrolling through her phone with perfectly manicured nails. There are some amazing content opportunities there. This waterfall near Hana that would be perfect for my wellness series. And the sunrise at Haleakala? Incredible lighting for photos. I was exhausted from the drive and not in the mood for whatever angle she was working. That's great, Vanessa. Have fun planning your own trip. She looked at me like I'd suggested something absurd. My own trip? Jake, I'm talking about our family trip, the one you planned. The trip I planned for Mom and Dad, not you. Her expression shifted to hurt confusion, which was her go-to move when someone didn't immediately give her what she wanted. Why wouldn't I be included? I'm family. Because I didn't invite you. This is a gift for our parents, not a group vacation. That's pretty hurtful, she said, voice getting that tremble that meant she was gearing up for emotional manipulation. Are you saying I'm not part of this family? I explained that wasn't what I was saying at all. I was saying I'd planned a specific trip for specific people, and adding someone at the last minute complicated logistics, messed with reservations, and changed the entire dynamic of what was supposed to be a relaxing vacation for two people who'd earned it. You don't think I've earned a vacation? She countered. I work hard too, you know. Vanessa's version of working hard was posting 3 photos a day and occasionally showing up to her boutique shifts when she felt like it. But pointing that out would just start an argument. So I tried a different approach. I'm sure you work hard in your way, but this trip is planned, paid for, and organized for 3 people. I'm sorry you weren't included, but that's how it is. She stared at me for a long moment, clearly running through her options for manipulation tactics. Then, she walked into the dining room where our parents were setting the table and announced in a voice trembling with manufactured sadness, Jake says I'm not invited to the family Hawaii trip. Mom's face immediately showed concern. What? Jake, what's she talking about? And just like that, I was the bad guy. Not Vanessa for inviting herself to something she wasn't part of, but me for enforcing a boundary. Dad tried to mediate. Let's all sit down and talk about this calmly. Over pot roast that I'd lost my appetite for, Vanessa laid out her case. She felt excluded. She felt like I didn't value her as a sister. She felt like I was using money to create divisions in the family. Every statement was carefully crafted to make me sound like a villain while positioning herself as the victim. I just want to spend time with my family, she said, eyes glistening. Is that so wrong? Mom looked torn. Jake, honey, maybe we could make room for one more? It would be nice to have everyone together. Everyone is together, I replied. The 3 people I invited. You're being pretty rigid about this, Dad observed, trying his diplomatic teacher voice. What's the real reason you don't want your sister there? The real reason was complicated. It was years of watching Vanessa get special treatment while I was expected to be responsible. It was every time I'd bailed her out financially, which happened at least twice a year. It was the way she treated every family gathering like a photo opportunity for her social media instead of actual quality time. It was knowing that if she came, the trip would stop being about Mom and Dad and start being about Vanessa's content creation needs. But saying all that would make me sound petty and jealous. So I went with something simpler. I planned a trip for 3 people. Adding a 4th person this late means reorganizing everything. I can pay my own way, Vanessa announced, which would have been more impressive if she hadn't borrowed $300 from me 2 months earlier that I still hadn't seen returned. Mom jumped on that. See? She'll pay her own way. Problem solved. I could see where this was going. If I kept refusing, I'd be the unreasonable one, the rigid, controlling brother who couldn't be flexible for his sister. They'd worn me down like this my whole life. Vanessa would create a situation, I'd object, and eventually I'd give in because it was easier than being labeled as difficult. Fine, I said, already regretting it. I'll book you an additional room at the hotel, but you're paying for your own flight, all your meals, and any activities you want to do. This isn't an all-expenses-paid vacation for you. Is that clear? Vanessa's face transformed from wounded sadness to triumphant joy. Of course. Thank you, Jake. You won't even know I'm there. I'll do my own thing most of the time anyway. That should have been my first clue that this was going to be a disaster. The next week passed in a blur of work and final travel preparations. I coordinated with the hotel about the additional room, which cost me extra because I'd booked during a promotional period that had since expired. I sent Vanessa the flight information and hotel details, explicitly reminding her that she needed to book her own airfare. She sent back a thumbs-up emoji. I assumed that meant she'd handled it. 2 days before departure, at 5:47 in the morning, my phone rang. I was already awake. Early shifts on drill sites meant being functional before sunrise, but barely coherent enough for conversation. We have a situation, Vanessa announced without preamble or greeting. What kind of situation? I asked, pouring coffee and mentally preparing for whatever crisis she'd created. The flights are all screwed up. I looked at booking, and the only seats available on your flight are in basic economy way in the back. Like row 38. That's not going to work. I reminded her that millions of people flew coach every single day and survived the experience. 6 hours in a normal airplane seat wouldn't kill her. You don't understand, she said, and I could hear the edge of panic in her voice. I need to be on the same flight for the family arrival photos. My followers expect that kind of content. But I can't post photos from a terrible seat in the back of the plane. The lighting is awful back there, and it looks cheap. The audacity of that statement hit me like cold water. She was complaining about seat quality on a flight she'd been told to book herself, for a trip she'd invited herself to, because it wouldn't look good enough for her 8,000 Instagram followers. Vanessa, that's not my problem. You knew you needed to book your own flight. You waited too long, and now you're dealing with the consequences. But I assumed you'd coordinate with me. I thought you'd block out seats for the whole family. Why would you assume that? I specifically told you to handle your own flight booking, because that's what family does. Her voice was rising. They coordinate. They make sure everyone has good seats together. I pointed out that family also doesn't invite themselves to trips and then complain about the arrangements she'd known for weeks that she needed to book a flight. If she'd wanted a better seat, she should have booked earlier. This is so typical of you, she snapped. You have all this money and you can't even help your sister out with a decent seat. Help you out? Vanessa, I didn't even invite you on this trip. You invited yourself, promised to pay your own way, and now you're mad that the consequences of booking late mean you have a coach seat. That's not my problem to solve. You're being a selfish jerk, she said. My followers expect a certain level of quality. If I post content from a terrible seat, it damages my brand, her 8,000 follower brand that had never made her a dime in actual income, her brand that existed primarily in her own mind as justification for living rent-free and working part-time. Figure it out, I told her. I need to get to work. She hung up without saying goodbye. I figured she was mad, but would eventually book the ticket, and we'd all deal with the seating situation when we got there. I should have known better. Vanessa never just accepted situations she didn't like. The morning of departure arrived with that mix of excitement and exhaustion that comes with 4 a.m. wake-ups. I drove to my parents' house to pick them up, my truck loaded with luggage and snacks for the drive to the airport. Mom and Dad were already waiting on the porch when I pulled up, sitting on their matching suitcases like kids waiting for the school bus. Mom had bought a new sundress specifically for the trip, floral print with palm trees. Dad was wearing his Hawaiian shirt, which was actually from Target, but he loved it anyway. They'd been counting down days for months, crossing dates off the kitchen calendar, and planning what they'd do first when we landed. Seeing their excitement made the early wake-up and long drive worth it. These were people who'd spent 30 years in classrooms, dealing with budget cuts and standardized testing pressure, and parents who thought their kid was a genius, even though little Jaden couldn't read at grade level. They deserved this vacation more than anyone I knew. We got to the airport with plenty of time to spare. Check-in went smoothly, bags were tagged and loaded, and we headed towards security, feeling good about the day. That's when Vanessa appeared. She looked like she'd gotten maybe 90 minutes of sleep. Her usually styled hair was in a messy bun, with strands sticking out at odd angles. Her makeup was smudged under her eyes. She was dragging an enormous suitcase that was definitely over the size limit, and she had this frantic energy that immediately set off alarm bells. "There you are," she said, slightly out of breath. "I've been texting you for an hour." I deliberately silenced my phone for the drive, wanting to enjoy the conversation with Mom and Dad without constant interruptions. "What's going on? We need to talk, right now, before we go through security." I suggested we could talk at the gate after security, but she insisted we needed to handle this immediately. Something about her tone made it clear this wasn't going to be a quick conversation. Dad looked concerned. Mom had that expression she gets when she knows conflict is coming and wants to be anywhere else. "What's so urgent?" I asked. "The seating situation. We need to fix it before we board." I reminded her we'd already discussed this multiple times. She was in economy, we were in our assigned seats. That was the arrangement she'd agreed to when she joined the trip. "That arrangement isn't going to work," she said firmly, like she was being reasonable instead of demanding. "I need a better seat for the flight content. My followers expect quality photos, and row 38 doesn't provide that. Then you should have booked earlier. I'm trying to explain that I need to be in a better seat for the photos. The whole flight is content opportunity, and I can't create quality content from the back of the plane." Dad tried to help. "Vanessa, honey, maybe you could just enjoy the flight instead of worrying about photos. Sometimes it's nice to just be present in the moment." Dad, you don't understand how this works. I have followers who expect consistent quality. If I post terrible airplane content, it damages my credibility. People might unfollow me. Mom chimed in with her peacemaker voice. Maybe we could check with the airline about upgrade options? They sometimes have last-minute seats available. I already checked, Vanessa said. There's nothing available in premium economy or first class. Every seat is sold except the terrible ones in back. The only solution is if someone gives me their seat. She was looking directly at me when she said it. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You want someone to give up their paid seat so you can take photos for Instagram? Not just someone you. You're in first class, which has the best lighting and background for content. If you give me your seat, the problem is solved. The sheer audacity of that request left me momentarily speechless. She wanted me to give up the first-class seat I'd paid for, on the trip I'd organized and funded, so she could take better photos for strangers on the internet. That's not happening. Why not? You're tall, but you can handle coach for one flight. I actually need the seat for my work. This is literally my career we're talking about. Your career is working part-time at a boutique selling overpriced candles. Instagram is a hobby. Her face flushed red. You're such a jerk. You have all this money. You have this successful career. And you can't do one small thing to help your sister succeed? Giving up my seat isn't a small thing. I'm 6 feet 3 inches, and I paid specifically for first class because coach is torture for 6 hours. And I'm asking you to make a small sacrifice for family. But I guess your comfort is more important than supporting my career goals. People were starting to stare at us. A family with small children moved to the other side of the waiting area. A businessman in a suit looked up from his laptop and frowned. Dad looked mortified. Mom was studying her boarding pass like it contained the secrets of the universe. I told Vanessa one final time, calmly, clearly, that I was not giving up my seat. She could either accept the seat she'd booked or miss the flight entirely. Her choice. Fine, she said, voice tight with barely contained rage. We'll see how Mom and Dad feel about their son being selfish and unsupportive when we're all in Hawaii. I'm sure they'll love knowing their son cares more about legroom than his own sister's career. We proceeded through security without further incident. I thought maybe the reality of the situation had finally penetrated, and she'd accepted that her manipulation hadn't worked. I was spectacularly wrong about that. At the gate, my parents and I settled into the waiting area. Dad pulled out his book about Hawaiian history. Mom scrolled through her phone, looking at restaurant recommendations I'd sent her. I sat back and tried to relax, thinking the drama was behind us. Vanessa paced near the windows, typing furiously on her phone, probably complaining to her friends about her terrible brother who wouldn't sacrifice his comfort for her important influencer career. About 30 minutes before boarding was supposed to start, she approached us again. Her jaw was set in that particular way that meant she'd decided on a course of action and wasn't backing down. This was Vanessa in full manipulation mode, and I'd seen it enough times to recognize the pattern. I've been thinking about this, she started, voice taking on that reasonable person tone she used when she decided she was right and everyone else was wrong. And I really need you to reconsider the seating situation. This trip is important to me, and you're ruining it before we even take off. I didn't even look up from my phone. We're done talking about this. No, we're not done. You're being incredibly selfish and someone needs to say it to your face. Dad tried to cut her off. Vanessa, let it go. We're all going to the same place. The seats don't matter. Stay out of this, Dad. This is between me and Jake. I closed my phone and looked at her directly. There is no between us. I'm flying first class in the seat I paid for. You're flying coach in the seat you booked late. That's the end of this discussion. You really don't care about me at all, do you? Her voice was getting louder, drawing attention from other passengers. You'd rather sit in your fancy seat with all that legroom than help your own sister? You'd rather be comfortable than supportive. I'd rather enjoy the vacation I planned and paid for without your manufactured drama and constant demands for special treatment. Manufactured drama? You think this is manufactured? I'm trying to build a career, and you're sabotaging me because you're jealous. Jealous of what, exactly? Your 8,000 followers? Your part-time job selling candles? Your complete inability to function without someone else paying your way? That's when she lost it completely. You entitled piece of trash, she screamed at full volume. The entire gate area went silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Kids stopped crying. Even the gate agents looked up from their computers. You think you're so much better than everyone because you have some engineering degree and make good money. You look down on me because I chose a different path. 2 gate agents started moving in our direction. Dad stood up quickly, hands out in a calming gesture. Mom had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide. I chose a creative path instead of selling out to corporate oil companies, Vanessa continued, her voice echoing through the terminal. But you can't see value in anything that doesn't come with a paycheck. You're shallow and materialistic and selfish. Before I could even form a response, before Dad could step between us, before anyone could intervene, Vanessa drew back her hand and slapped me across the face with her full strength. The sound echoed through the terminal like a gunshot. Silence fell over the entire gate area like a heavy blanket. My left cheek burned where her palm had connected. My glasses had shifted sideways from the impact. Every single passenger in that boarding area stopped what they were doing and stared at us. Parents covered their children's ears. Business travelers looked up from their laptops. The elderly couple who'd been sharing a muffin just stared, mouths slightly open. A gate agent appeared at my elbow within seconds. "Ma'am, I need you to step back right now." Vanessa was breathing hard, her hand still raised slightly, the reality of what she'd just done starting to register on her face. Her eyes were wide, like she couldn't quite believe she'd gone that far. "He deserved it," she said, but her voice wavered. "He's been treating me like garbage all morning. He provoked me." Two airport security officers materialized seemingly out of nowhere. One positioned himself between Vanessa and me. The other started asking questions in that calm, professional tone that people in authority use when dealing with potential violence. "Sir, are you all right?" the first officer asked me. My face was throbbing. My cheek felt like it was on fire, but I nodded. "I'm fine." "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us," the second officer told Vanessa. "What? No, we have a flight to catch. I can't miss this flight. You just assaulted another passenger in front of approximately 70 witnesses and 2 gate agents. You're not flying anywhere today." The meltdown that followed was spectacular in its desperation. Vanessa started crying. Real tears this time. Not the manufactured ones she used for manipulation. She insisted it was a misunderstanding, that I'd provoked her, that she couldn't miss this flight because it was a family vacation, and her parents would be devastated if she wasn't there. The officers weren't impressed. They'd clearly seen plenty of airport tantrums before, and Vanessa's wasn't unique or compelling. They just stood there professionally while she cycled through denial, anger, bargaining, and finally sobbing acceptance. They escorted her away from the gate, still crying and protesting. A gate agent approached me with paperwork and a practiced, sympathetic expression. "We need to file an incident report," she explained, pulling out a tablet. "Standard procedure for any physical altercation in the terminal. Are you interested in pressing charges?" I should have said no. Should have been the bigger person. Taken the hit. Literally. And written it off as Vanessa being dramatic. Should have let her actions slide like I'd let everything else slide for the past 28 years. But I looked at my mom, who was crying quietly, at my dad, whose face showed embarrassment and disappointment, at all the passengers who'd witnessed my sister assault me in public, because I wouldn't give up a seat on a vacation I was paying for. "Yes," I said clearly. "I'm pressing charges." The gate agent nodded and made notes on her tablet. Within minutes, Vanessa's name was flagged in the airline's computer system. She wouldn't be flying on this airline today, or possibly any airline depending on how the charges played out, and whether she ended up on a no-fly list. Mom was distraught. She grabbed my arm, mascara running down her face. "Jake, maybe we should all stay. We can't just leave Vanessa here alone dealing with this." "She's not alone," I said firmly. "She's with airport security, and she made her own choices. We're getting on this plane. We're going to Hawaii. We're having the vacation I planned and paid for. But she's your sister, and she assaulted me in public because I wouldn't give her my seat. I'm not rewarding that behavior by canceling a trip I've spent months planning and thousands of dollars funding." "Jake's right," Dad said quietly, putting his arm around Mom. "Vanessa crossed a line today. We can't enable this anymore. She needs to face consequences for once in her life." Mom started to protest, but Dad's expression stopped her. After 30 years of marriage, she recognized when he'd made a decision he wasn't backing down from. Boarding started. First class was called. First I stood up, grabbed my carry-on, and headed for the gate agent scanning boarding passes. Behind me, I could hear Mom crying softly. Dad was murmuring something to her, probably trying to calm her down. Part of me felt guilty for not staying, for not being the family peacemaker who fixed everything and made sure everyone was happy. But a bigger part of me was done being that person. Done sacrificing my comfort, my boundaries, my plans for the sake of keeping peace with someone who'd never once considered my feelings. I settled into my first-class seat. The flight attendant brought warm nuts and drinks. I put in my earbuds, selected a movie, and tried to ignore the guilt trip texts from Vanessa that were already filling my phone before we even took off. The flight attendant made her announcements. The plane pushed back from the gate. And we left Vanessa behind, dealing with airport security and the consequences of her own actions. Mom cried for the first hour of the flight. I could see Dad holding her hand from my seat, could see him talking to her quietly, probably reassuring her that this wasn't her fault, that they were doing the right thing by not enabling Vanessa's behavior anymore. By hour 2, they'd pulled out the guidebook and started discussing which beaches to visit first. By hour 3, they were looking at restaurant recommendations and getting excited about trying traditional Hawaiian food. By hour 4, Mom had stopped crying entirely and was actually laughing at something Dad said. Turns out removing Vanessa from the equation improved the trip significantly before it even started. We landed in Maui to perfect weather. 84 degrees, light breeze, endless blue sky. The rental car was exactly what I'd reserved, running smoothly and clean. The hotel was right on the beach, just like the photos. Our rooms had ocean views and comfortable beds and everything we could possibly need. That first sunset, watching my parents walk along the beach holding hands and taking photos together, reminded me exactly why I'd planned this trip. This was what I'd wanted. My parents relaxing, enjoying themselves, experiencing something beautiful without stress or conflict. Vanessa sent approximately 200 texts during our first day. They ranged from furious to manipulative to self-pitying, cycling through every emotional manipulation tactic she'd perfected over the years. Hope you're happy. I'm stuck at home while you're all in Hawaii without me. Mom is devastated. You've completely ruined this family. The assault charges are going to cost me thousands in legal fees. Thanks for destroying my life over a stupid seat. I can't believe you do this to your own sister. You're heartless. Dad said they might have to post bail if I get arrested. You're literally putting our parents through hell. I turned off my phone and focused on the vacation. The next 3 days were everything I'd hoped they'd be. We snorkeled at Molokini Crater, where Mom saw a sea turtle and cried happy tears. We drove the road to Hana, stopping at every waterfall and scenic overlook to take photos. We watched the sunrise at Haleakala, standing on top of a dormant volcano while the sky turned colors I didn't have names for. We ate at restaurants with ocean views where Dad tried every type of fresh fish they had, and Mom fell in love with pineapple upside-down cake made with actual Hawaiian pineapples. We took a helicopter tour and saw parts of the island that most tourists never access. We spent an entire day just lounging on the beach, reading books, and swimming and napping under an umbrella. My parents were having the time of their lives. Mom took approximately 800 photos on her phone. Dad bought a carved tiki statue that he planned to put in their garden. They held hands during dinner, laughed at each other's jokes, and looked more relaxed than I'd seen them in years. On day 4, Dad and I were having breakfast on the Hotel Lanai when he brought up the situation back home. Your mother wants to know if you'll drop the charges against Vanessa, he said carefully, not quite making eye contact. No. He nodded like he'd expected that answer. She slapped you in public. I'm not excusing that. But you're her brother, and this could have serious legal consequences for her. Maybe even jail time or a criminal record. Dad, she assaulted me in an airport because I wouldn't give up my seat. She invited herself on this trip, promised to handle her own arrangements, then demanded I sacrifice my comfort for her Instagram photos. When I said no, she physically attacked me in front of dozens of witnesses. Why would I drop the charges? He sighed and looked out at the ocean. Because she's family. Because your mother is worried sick about what happens next. Because even when people make terrible choices, sometimes we choose forgiveness over punishment. Mom has been worried sick about Vanessa her whole life, worried about her grades, her job situation, her finances, her emotional state. Meanwhile, nobody worried about me because I had my act together. Nobody checked if I was okay, if I needed support, if the constant pressure to be the responsible one was wearing me down. That's not fair, Dad said quietly. We love you both equally. You love us equally, but you've never treated us equally. Vanessa has gotten away with behavior you never would have tolerated from me. She's 28 years old, lives at home rent-free, works part-time, and you still make excuses for her. Meanwhile, I was expected to be responsible and mature from the time I was 15. He didn't have a response to that. We sat in silence for a while, watching waves crash against the shore. You're right, he finally said. We made mistakes raising both of you. We held you to different standards, and that wasn't fair. But she's still your sister, and this could really hurt her future. Her actions hurt her future, not me. I'm just refusing to protect her from the consequences of assaulting someone in public. Dad nodded slowly and didn't bring it up again. Mom tried a different approach during dinner that night. She suggested that when we got back, we could all sit down as a family and work through this. Maybe Vanessa needed support rather than punishment. Maybe she was struggling more than we realized. Maybe there were underlying issues driving her behavior. I pointed out that struggling doesn't justify assault. Plenty of people have difficult lives, financial stress, career uncertainty, and mental health challenges without physically attacking their siblings in airports. She's always been sensitive, Mom said, like that explained anything. She's 28 years old. Being sensitive doesn't excuse violent behavior. At some point, she needs to be held accountable for her actions. You're really not going to drop the charges? No, Mom, I'm not. She looked disappointed and sad, but she didn't push further. The rest of dinner passed quietly, with occasional comments about the food or plans for the next day. By day 6, my parents had stopped bringing up Vanessa entirely. They were too busy enjoying the vacation to focus on drama happening thousands of miles away. We took a catamaran sailing trip where we saw dolphins. We attended a traditional luau with fire dancers and roasted pig. We rented bikes and rode along the coast, stopping for shaved ice and photos. The morning of day 7, our last full day before flying home, Dad knocked on my hotel room door around 7 a.m. Got a minute to talk? He asked. We sat on the balcony overlooking the ocean. He was quiet for a long time, just watching surfers paddle out to catch early morning waves. Your mother and I have been talking, he finally said, about Vanessa, about how we raised you two differently, about the unfair expectations we placed on you. I waited, not sure where this was going. You're right about everything you said. We did enable her. We did hold you to higher standards while making excuses for her behavior. We thought we were helping her by being supportive and understanding, but we actually created someone who doesn't know how to handle disappointment or take responsibility for her actions. Yeah, I'm sorry we put you in that position for so many years. Sorry we expected you to be the mature, responsible one while letting her act like a child. That wasn't fair to you, and it didn't help her either. We failed both of you in different ways. It was the first real apology I'd gotten from either parent about the lifetime of double standards I'd lived with. Thanks, Dad. That means something. Are you still going to press charges? Yes. He nodded without surprise. Good. She needs to face real consequences for once in her life. Maybe this will finally be the wake-up call she needs. We sat together watching the sunrise, and for the first time in years, I felt like my dad actually understood me. The flight home was peaceful. My parents talked enthusiastically about planning another trip, maybe to Alaska or the Canadian Rockies. Mom showed me her favorite photos from the week, already planning which ones to print and frame for their living room. Dad had bought 3 books about Hawaiian history that he'd already started reading. They were happy, genuinely, deeply happy. And I realized that if Vanessa had come on this trip, none of that happiness would have been possible. She would have turned every activity into a photo opportunity, every meal into content creation, every family moment into something performative for her followers. Leaving her behind had been the right choice. When we landed back in San Antonio, reality came crashing back fast. Vanessa had been busy during our Hawaii trip. She'd hit social media hard, painting herself as the tragic victim of family cruelty. According to her carefully crafted sob story, she'd been abandoned during a mental health crisis and excluded from a family vacation by her vindictive brother, who was pressing excessive charges over a minor disagreement. Her followers ate it up. I started getting messages from strangers calling me heartless and abusive. Someone even tracked down my work email and filed a complaint about my violent tendencies. The irony was almost funny. She'd assaulted me, but somehow I was the villain for pressing charges. Thing is, Vanessa made one critical mistake. She'd posted her lies publicly, creating a permanent record that was about to bite her hard. Because I had something she didn't. Evidence. Airport security had given me the surveillance footage as part of the incident report. Multiple angles showing everything. Vanessa escalating, getting in my face, witnesses backing away, the slap, the shocked reactions. No context needed. No he said, she said. Just clear footage of her assaulting me while I stood there trying to stay calm. I posted the video with a simple caption. Since there seems to be confusion about what happened, here's the actual security footage. I was assaulted for refusing to give up my first-class seat. Not manipulation. Just facts. Judge for yourselves. The response was brutal. People who'd been sending me hate messages went silent. Vanessa's followers who'd been defending her started demanding explanations. The comments on her posts flipped from supportive to accusatory. Within hours, Vanessa tried damage control, claiming the video was out of context and that I'd been emotionally provoking her off-camera. Nobody bought it. The evidence was too clear. Her follower count dropped like a stone. Within 48 hours, she'd lost over 2,000 followers. Small brands quietly distanced themselves. The boutique where she worked part-time let her go after the owner saw the video. Within a week, she deleted most of her social media and basically vanished from the internet. Mom called, upset that I'd humiliated Vanessa by posting the video. She humiliated herself, I said. All I did was post the truth. She's lost everything she'd been building. She lost credibility she never deserved. Maybe she'll learn that actions have consequences. The assault charges moved forward. Vanessa tried to fight them, but the evidence was overwhelming. She eventually took a plea deal. Guilty to simple assault, 1-year probation, 40 hours community service, and restitution for my legal fees. She also got flagged by that airline and several others, making future air travel a nightmare for her. My parents slowly came around. They stopped making excuses and stopped expecting me to sacrifice my boundaries. Dad and I started having actual conversations. Mom sent me recipes, small things showing they were starting to see me as a person, not just the responsible son who fixed problems. Vanessa and I don't talk anymore. Last I heard, she'd moved to Phoenix, working customer service for some online retail company, living in a small apartment with a roommate. No more influencer dreams. No more living rent-free. No more expecting other people to fund her lifestyle. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.